The first time I saw Brooke Winslow in 15 years, she was unconscious under the fluorescent lights of my emergency room, with blood on her temple, rainwater in her hair, and a stranger yelling that he was her fiancé. That was how my Tuesday night started. My name is Owen Hart. I was 34 years old, an ER doctor at St. Agnes Medical in Columbus, and I had built a decent life out of staying useful when everyone else was panicking. Broken ribs, allergic reactions, kitchen burns, heart scares at 2 in the morning, I could handle all of it. What I could not handle was seeing the girl who used to sit 2 rows ahead of me in American history being wheeled through the ambulance doors on a stretcher. Female, 34, the paramedic called out, walking fast beside her. Possible concussion, brief loss of consciousness, single car impact, low speed, driver's side. Vital stable, but she's confused. I was already moving. Then I saw her face. And for one stupid second, I stopped being a doctor. Brooke Winslow. At 17, she had been the kind of girl who made boys like me forget how lockers worked. Not in a polished, pageant way. Brooke had been different. Quick smile, messy ponytail, paint on her fingers from theater sets, always carrying 3 books like she expected the world to end between classes and wanted options. She had laughed at my terrible jokes in chemistry. Once. I had lived on that laugh for an embarrassing amount of time. Now she was pale, soaked, and shivering beneath a foil blanket. Dr. Hart? My nurse, Priya Shah, snapped me back with one sharp look. You know her? I knew her, I said, forcing my hand steady. High school. Then be a doctor first. Priya had a gift for saying the thing you needed and hated at the same time. I stepped in beside the stretcher. Brooke, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. The man who had come in behind the paramedics pushed too close. He wore an expensive navy coat, his hair too perfect for a rainstorm, and panic that looked more like irritation. I need to be with her, he said. I'm Dean, her fiancé. Brooke made a small sound, not a word, not yet. Just a sound that made her hand curl into the sheet. I noticed. When you work emergency medicine long enough, you learn that fear has accents. Some people are scared because they hurt. Some are scared because they do not know what happened. And some are scared because a certain voice just entered the room. Sir, you'll need to wait outside while we assess her, Priya said. I'm not waiting outside. I looked at him then, calmly, not as the quiet kid from Fairview High who once ate lunch in the band hallway to avoid being seen alone. As a doctor. You are, I said. His jaw tightened. Do you know who I am? No, I said. But I know where the waiting room is. Priya's mouth twitched like she was fighting a smile. Not the time, but still. Small victories mattered. Security guided Dean back before he could make a scene. The doors swung shut behind him, and suddenly the room felt less crowded. Brooke's eyes opened. For a moment she stared through me, dazed and unfocused. Then her gaze sharpened just enough to land on my face. I saw recognition move through her slowly. Owen? She whispered. My name and her voice hit me harder than it had any right to. Yeah, I said gently. It's me. You're at St. Agnes. You were in a car accident, but you're stable. I'm going to take care of you. Her eyes glistened, whether from pain or rain or something older, I couldn't tell. You became a doctor, she murmured. That was the rumor. A tiny, fragile smile touched her mouth. You always were annoyingly good in emergencies. I almost laughed, except my throat had gone tight, because she shouldn't have known that. In high school, Brooke and I had never been close enough for her to know anything real about me. She was theater lights and hallway crowds. I was the guy who fixed the projector, carried extra pencils, and disappeared before dances got slow. I checked her pupils. Do you know what day it is? Tuesday. Good. Do you know who the president is? She blinked. Unfortunately. Priya coughed into her shoulder. There she was. Even half-conscious, Brooke Winslow still had timing. I leaned closer to clean the cut near her hairline. My gloved fingers brushed wet strands away from her face. And for one dangerous second, the years collapsed. I remembered her laughing under the bleachers during a spring thunderstorm, holding her shoes because the football field had turned to mud. I remembered wanting to ask if she needed a ride home and being too afraid she'd say no kindly. Kindness at 17 could still crush you. Any neck pain? I asked. A little. We'll keep the collar on until imaging. Her hand moved suddenly and caught my wrist. Not hard. Just enough to stop me. Owen, she whispered, and her eyes searched mine like she was trying to confirm I was real. I'm here. Her thumb pressed against my pulse through the glove. Then she said the words that made every machine in the room seem to fade. You saved me again. I went completely still. Again. The word opened a door I had nailed shut years ago, because there had been one night, senior year, when Brooke had needed saving. But she had never known it was me. Before I could answer, the curtain snapped open and Dean's voice cut into the room. Brooke, tell them I'm allowed to stay. Brooke's hand tightened around my wrist. Her eyes did not leave mine. And in a voice so quiet, only I could hear it, she said, Please don't let him take me home. For half a second, the ER narrowed to Brooke's fingers around my wrist and the terror behind her eyes. Then training took over. Mr. Voss, I said, turning toward Dean, you were asked to wait outside. His gaze dropped to Brooke's hand on me. Something ugly flickered across his face. She's confused, he said. She hit her head. She doesn't know what she's saying. Brooke's grip tightened. I stepped between them just enough to block his view of her. That's exactly why we need space to assess her. I'm her fiancé, and I'm her physician. The words came out level, but Priya heard the warning underneath. She moved to Brooke's other side, quietly pulling the curtain wider so security could see in. Dean laughed once, sharp and humorless. This is ridiculous. Brooke, tell him. Brooke's lips parted. No sound came out. Her eyes had gone glassy again, not from concussion this time, from fear. I had seen that look on patients before, women who flinched when their husbands reached for their purse, men who swore they fell downstairs while their partner answered for them. Teenagers with perfect explanations and bruises shaped like fingers. Brooke, I said softly without looking away from Dean, do you want him in the room? Dean's expression hardened. Don't pressure her. I ignored him. Brooke swallowed. No. One word, barely a whisper, but it landed like a gavel. Priya immediately turned toward the doorway. Security! Dean lunged one step forward. You don't understand what she's doing. I moved faster, planting myself in his path. You need to leave this treatment area now. His face was inches from mine. He smelled like rain and expensive cologne. You have no idea who you're protecting, he said quietly. I held his stare. I have a patient who said no. For a moment, I thought he might swing at me. Part of me almost welcomed it. Not the doctor part, not the grown man part. The 17-year-old in me who had watched Brooke cry behind the auditorium and wished he'd been brave enough to step out of the shadows. Security arrived before Dean decided. 2 guards guided him back with firm hands and practiced voices. He resisted just enough to make a point, not enough to get arrested. At the threshold, he looked past me at Brooke. This isn't over, he said. The doors shut. Only then did Brooke start shaking. Priya reached for a warmed blanket. You're safe for the moment. Brooke made a sound that was almost a laugh. For the moment. That's generous. I crouched beside the bed so she didn't have to look up at me. Brooke, I need to ask you some questions. Some are medical, some are safety questions. You can answer only what you're comfortable answering. Her eyes moved to mine. You sound like you practice that. I wish I didn't have to. She looked away. The CT scan came back clean. No brain bleed, thank God. But she did have a mild concussion, bruised ribs, and a laceration that needed stitches. While Priya cleaned the wound, I reviewed the imaging and tried not to keep glancing toward the hall. Dean was still out there somewhere, and Brooke knew it. When Priya stepped away to update the chart, Brooke said, You remember senior year? I froze with the suture packet in my hand. Which part? The parking lot after the winter formal. My heartbeat changed. There it was. The night. I had spent 15 years telling myself it hadn't mattered because she never knew. Because I hadn't done it for credit. Because afterward she'd graduated, left town, and become another what if I carried like an old scar. I remember, I said. Her eyes filled. I thought it was a teacher. It wasn't. She stared at me. Senior year, winter formal had ended in sleet and teenage drama. I'd been outside waiting for my mother to finish a double shift so she could pick me up. Brooke had come out alone in a silver dress, crying so hard she couldn't see the ice under her heels. She had gone to that dance with Wade Harlan, which I had never understood. Rich, popular, mean when adults weren't looking. I'd heard him grab her arm. I'd heard her say, "Let go." I was not brave then, not really. But something in me had moved anyway. I'd pulled the fire alarm by the gym entrance. The whole dance flooded outside. Teachers, parents, half the basketball team. Wade released her so fast he almost slipped. Brooke vanished into the crowd. No one knew it was me. Except apparently somehow, Brooke did. "I saw you," she whispered. "In the reflection of the trophy case. You were wearing that awful green coat." Despite everything, I huffed a laugh. It was warm. It was criminal. For one breath, we were 17 again. Then her face crumpled. "I should have thanked you." "You didn't owe me that." "Yes," she said. "I did." I began stitching the cut near her temple, careful and slow. "What happened tonight, Brooke?" Her lashes lowered. "I was trying to leave." "Dean?" She nodded once. The monitors hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried, then was soothed. "He isn't always—" She stopped, ashamed of the sentence before she finished it. I kept my voice calm. "You don't have to defend him to me." A tear slid into her hairline. "Everyone loves him. My parents, my boss, his charity board. The man shakes hands like he's running for office. And behind closed doors?" She closed her eyes. That was answer enough. "He has my phone," she said. "My wallet, too." I grabbed the spare key to my old car and drove. It was raining. He followed me. He kept calling the car through the Bluetooth over and over. I looked down to disconnect it, and I hit the median. My jaw tightened. "Did he hit you before you left?" Silence. Then she pulled the blanket down just enough for me to see the bruise blooming dark around her upper arm. Finger marks. Priya returned and saw it too. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. "We can call a social worker," Priya said gently. "And police if you want." Brooke opened her mouth. Down the hall, the automatic doors hissed open again, and I heard heels on the tile. Brooke went white. I set the suture tools down and stood. Dean had come back, and this time he wasn't alone. He had brought her mother. Diane Winslow arrived in a wet camel coat and pearl earrings, holding her purse against her chest like a shield. 15 years hadn't changed her much. She still looked at a room the way some people check a mirror. "Where is she?" she asked. "Where's my daughter?" Dean stayed one careful step behind her, letting the mother do the walking. Smart. Terrible, but smart. "Ma'am, this is a treatment area," Priya said. "You'll need to check in at the desk." "I'm her mother." "And she's an adult patient," I said. "She decides who comes back." Diane's eyes moved to my badge, then to my face, and something in her expression shifted from panic to social calculation. "Owen?" she said. "Owen Hart? Little Owen from the band hallway?" Behind me, I heard Brooke breathe out something that might have been a laugh under different circumstances. "That's me," I said. "Ma'am, your daughter asked that Mr. Voss not come back here. I'm honoring that." Diane turned on Brooke's curtain like it had insulted her. "Brooke Ann, enough. Dean drove all the way here in the rain." "He followed me in the rain," Brooke said. Her voice came from behind the curtain, thin but audible, and the whole hallway heard it. Dean spread his hands. "Diane, this is what I told you about. She gets like this." That sentence, "she gets like this." I have heard it in 100 rooms, and it has never once meant anything good. Brooke pushed the curtain back herself. She was in a hospital gown with stitches in her temple and a bruise going purple on her arm. And she looked at her mother the way you look at a door you already know is locked. "Mom," she said, "look at my arm." Diane looked. For a second, 1 second, something real crossed her face. Then she said, "You always bruise easily." The hallway went quiet. I have seen patients survive worse than a car crash. I watched Brooke survive that sentence. Priya, Brooke said, and her chin was shaking, but her words weren't. Please call the police. Yes, Priya said, already reaching for the phone. Dean's polish cracked. Brooke, don't be stupid. Don't talk to my patient, I said. You, he said, jabbing a finger toward me, are a hospital employee with a clipboard. Then you should be thrilled, I said. Clipboards create records. Dr. Anika Menon came around the corner then, silver hair pinned back, expression sharp enough to cut glass. She had been an emergency physician longer than I'd been alive and scared residents, surgeons, and administrators equally. What is happening in my department? She asked. Priya gave a concise report. Patient request, injury pattern, documented bruising, visitor refusing to leave. Dr. Menon listened without blinking. Then she turned to security. Escort these two to the lobby. If they come back through those doors, it's trespassing. Diane drew herself up. I am her mother. Then wait where your daughter can invite you, Dr. Menon said. That's how invitations work. Dean didn't resist. That was almost worse. He let himself be walked out, and at the doors he looked back with an expression I understood perfectly. He was waiting me out. He had waited people out before. You'll come home, he said. You always do. The doors closed. Brooke sat down on the edge of the bed very slowly, like her whole skeleton had been holding that up. He's right, she whispered. I always do. Not tonight, I said. Tonight I'm concussed and can't drive. Tonight you asked for the police, I said. Out loud, in a hallway full of witnesses. That's not nothing, Brooke. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. My mother is going to tell everyone I embarrass the family. Your mother is going to be wrong. A tired laugh escaped her, breaking into a sob halfway through. Maribel, our social worker, arrived 20 minutes later with a calm voice and a cardigan the color of oatmeal. She pulled up a chair and asked Brooke what she needed tonight. Not what Dean would allow, not what looked reasonable, not what would keep the peace. Brooke said she had nowhere safe to go. My friends are mostly his friends now, she said. He made sure of that. And my sister lives in Denver with 3 kids and a futon. Denver has flights, Mara said, and Columbus has beds. Let's start with tonight. They talked about emergency housing and protective orders while I stepped out to chart. My hands were steady until I reached the bruise documentation. Then they shook. 15 years ago, I pulled a fire alarm and told myself it was enough because she never knew, because nothing came after. I still wasn't sure anything came after. When I came back, Brooke was alone, staring at the rain-streaked window with a plastic cup of ginger ale she wasn't drinking. Owen, she said, why did you do it? At the formal. Because you said no, and he didn't listen. That's the doctor answer. It's a true answer. She turned her head against the pillow. Is there another one? There was. There had been for 15 years, and it was sitting right behind my teeth. But she was in a gown with my stitches in her temple, 6 hours out of the worst night of her life, and I was the man writing her discharge paperwork. Ask me when I'm not your doctor, I said. Brooke looked at me for a long moment. That sounds like a promise. It's a boundary. Owen. A ghost of the old smile. It's both. Priya passed the doorway, coughed the word boundary into her fist, and kept walking. Brooke laughed, then winced at her ribs, then stopped laughing and stared down at her hands. There's something you should know, she said quietly. About that night. Okay. I didn't go to that dance with Wade Harlan because I wanted to. She didn't finish the sentence. Officer Dana Wilk knocked on the frame with 2 knuckles, notebook already in hand, and whatever Brooke had been about to tell me folded itself back up and went away. I remember thinking it would keep. I had no idea how long. Brooke gave her statement at 4 in the morning, sitting up in a bed she kept trying to make neat in Priya's borrowed Ohio State hoodie because her blouse was torn at the shoulder. She asked me to stay. I stayed in a chair by the door, close enough to be there and far enough to be nobody's answer. I listened to her describe the first time Dean squeezed her wrist hard enough to bruise, and the flowers that showed up at her office the next day. The way he corrected her clothes, then her laugh, then her friends. The way the condo lease had only his name on it, so leaving meant leaving everything. The way he never once raised his voice when anyone else was home. By the end, Priya had turned away under the pretense of restocking gauze. Officer Wilk stayed gentle. Do you want to pursue an emergency protective order? Brooke looked at the bruise on her own arm for a long time. Yes, she said. Near dawn, the storm finally quit. Paperwork got signed. A victim advocate talked her through the next 72 hours on speakerphone. Mara found her a bed at a place that doesn't put its address on the internet, and a ride there that wasn't me, which was correct, and which I hated. I printed the discharge instructions myself. Concussion precautions, I said. Someone checks on you tonight. No screens for a few days. Come back for anything that scares you. Anything? She said. That's a wide net right now. Come back anyway. She took the folder. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us moved for half a heartbeat longer than two adults need to hand over paperwork. At the ambulance bay, in gray morning light, she turned around. You saved me again, she said. You said no again, I said. Twice in 15 years in front of people who didn't want to hear it. That's the part that worked. Brooke smiled and it cracked something in my chest. Then she got in the car and left, and I went home and slept badly. I didn't see her for 3 weeks. That was on purpose. She wasn't my patient anymore, but she had been, and she was also newly free, which is a different thing than free. She needed to find out which choices were hers before anyone handed her a new one. Priya called it the only emotionally intelligent thing you've ever done. She wasn't wrong. Then, on a cold Saturday, there was an envelope waiting for me at the ER desk. Inside was a small watercolor of the old Fairview High trophy case. In the reflection, barely there, a skinny boy in an ugly green coat stood with one hand on a fire alarm. On the back she'd written, "You were brave before you knew you were." Her number was underneath. I stared at it for 10 full minutes before Priya took the card out of my hand and said, "Text her, or I'm reporting you to Dr. Menon for criminal stupidity." So I texted. Nothing heroic. Nothing smooth. "Coffee sometime?" Brooke wrote back. "Only if you promise not to wear the coat." We met at a place on 5th with bad chairs and good pastry. She was staying with a coworker in Clintonville, working reduced hours, sleeping with the hall light on. Dean had been charged. His lawyer was already talking about anger management classes and a first offense, and she'd learned not to plan her life around what a court might do. She looked healthier. She also looked nervous, which I understood because so was I. 2 hours in, she said, "I never finished my sentence in the hospital. About Wade. About you." She turned her cup around twice. "Owen, I asked you to that dance." I set my coffee down. "No, you didn't. I wrote you a note 3 weeks before. I was 17 and terrified, and I couldn't say it out loud, so I folded it into a square and put it through the vent of locker 214. The floor tilted a little. 214 was mine until October, I said. The pipe burst in B-Wing. They moved 12 of us to the band hallway. Brooke went very still. "I waited 9 days, she said. You walked past me in history every morning and said nothing. So I decided you'd read it and were being kind about it. And when Wade asked me, I said yes because I was humiliated and I wanted to be somewhere loud. I sat there while 15 years rearranged themselves. Every time I'd told myself she never noticed me. Every time I'd called it a harmless crush on a girl who lived in a different weather system. I thought you didn't know I existed, I said. I thought you'd read my handwriting and decided not to. Brooke, I ate lunch in a hallway for 2 years so nobody would see me be alone. I know, she said. I walked past that hallway on purpose. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then she reached across the terrible little table and took my hand deliberately, the way you do when you've decided something. I'm not asking you to answer a note from 2010, she said. I'm asking about now. And I need you to know this isn't gratitude. Gratitude would be a card. I already sent you a card. I laughed and my voice came out wrecked. You did send a card. So, her thumb moved once across my knuckles. Say something, Dr. Hart. I leaned in and kissed her in a coffee shop in daylight, 15 years and 1 fire alarm too late. When we finally pulled back, she pressed her forehead to mine and said, 9 days, Owen, You owe me 9 days. It took us longer than 9 days to figure out what we were doing. We were careful, on purpose. Some weeks she wanted a girlfriend's Saturday, movies, groceries, a hardware store trip to buy a door chain she installed herself and refused to let me touch. Some weeks she needed a friend and a long silence. I learned to ask, do you want advice or company? She almost always chose company, and I almost always wanted to give advice, and that's a whole relationship in one sentence. Dean pleaded to a misdemeanor assault, probation, a class, a fine that meant nothing to him. He moved his firm's office to Cleveland 6 months later, and I'd be lying if I said we never checked a parking lot again. That's the part nobody puts in movies. Nothing is signed and sealed. You just get further away week by week until the fear is a thing that happened instead of a thing happening. Her mother took 11 months. She showed up at Brooke's apartment one Sunday with a lemon cake and no speech and said, "You always bruise easily" was a stupid thing to say. Brooke let her in. That's still a work in progress, and Brooke gets to decide the pace. By that spring, Brooke had her own place in Grandview with yellow curtains, a rescue cat named Mabel who hated me for exactly 2 weeks, and a studio corner that always smelled faintly of paint and turpentine. She cut back to part-time at the design firm and started teaching a Thursday watercolor class at the rec center for 11 retirees who adored her and one 12-year-old who was better than all of them. I kept a toothbrush there by June. By August, she had a drawer at my place and an opinion about my curtains. The first time she came to St. Agnes as a visitor instead of a patient, she brought Priya a coffee and me a paper bag of dumplings, and Dr. Menon walked past, looked at us for 1 second and said, "Ah, good." "That's the warmest thing she's ever said to anyone," Priya told her. "He's my boyfriend," Brooke said, testing the word out loud in a hallway where she'd once been too afraid to speak. "I'm allowed to feed him." A year after that night, Fairview High held its charity art auction. The trophy case was new. The auditorium still smelled like dust, wood polish, and teenage panic. Her painting hung under soft lights. She'd called it Again. Not a hospital room, not a car crash, not Dean. A rain-washed street at dawn, 2 figures under the open doors of an ambulance bay, one in a borrowed hoodie, one in blue scrubs. Their hands were joined. "You changed it," I said. "I painted the first version when I still thought I was supposed to leave room," she said. "Then I stopped. The doctor in this looks very handsome." Really, I was going for exhausted and emotionally constipated. Art is subjective. She laughed, and there was nothing fragile left in it. Afterward, we walked out across the parking lot where sleet had fallen 15 years before. She stopped near the gym entrance under the little red box on the wall. "I used to think being saved meant somebody carried you out," she said. I waited. She slipped her hand into mine. "Now I think it means somebody gives you enough time to choose the door yourself." She looked up at me. "I chose this one, twice technically. The note counts." "The note counts," I agreed. "Take me home, Owen." So I did. Her painting rode in the back seat, and her fingers stayed warm around mine the whole way. We got married 2 years later on a Saturday in October in the rec center room where she teaches, because she said she wanted to be married somewhere she'd built herself, 40 people, folding chairs. Priya cried harder than either mother. Dr. Menon gave a toast that was 3 sentences long and made everyone straighten their posture. Brooke wore green shoes, which she claimed had nothing to do with the coat, which is a lie she maintains to this day. Last Tuesday, I came off a 14-hour shift at 6 in the morning. Rain again, because Columbus. I let myself in and found her asleep on the couch with a brush still in her hand, and Blue on her wrist, Mabel on her feet, the small one asleep in the bassinet by the window, because our daughter refuses to sleep anywhere she can't hear her mother breathing. I took the brush out of Brooke's hand. She didn't wake up. She just said my name the way you say a thing you're sure of. 15 years ago, I pulled a fire alarm and ran, and told myself that was all a quiet kid could do. It turns out the bravest thing I ever did was stand in a hallway and say a woman's no out loud until the room heard it, and then wait until she was well and steady and standing on her own 2 feet before I let myself hope she'd walk toward me. So tell me, if a woman you'd loved since you were 17 grabbed your wrist in your own ER and whispered, "Please don't let him take me home," what would you have done, and would you have waited 3 weeks before you called her? Has someone ever misread your silence as a no, or have you ever misread theirs? I want to hear about it in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll meet you here again next time.